Welcome to Small Talk, where each week we sit down to discuss the sermon-based small group questions at Wallula Christian Church.
Hello and welcome back to Wallula's weekly podcast. My name is Zach Bolin, youth pastor here at Wallula Christian Church. I'm joined by Craig Archer and, as always, Lance Kaufman. Oh, wait, that is not Lance Kaufman. We have a special guest today. Christian Swift is joining us. Lance is gone for the week. We get to run this place, or at least pick our guest. That's about all we could do. So Craig and I have chosen a friend of ours, Christian, who's from our small group that we meet on Thursday mornings. And so Christian.
Afternoons.
Oh, yeah, you're right. This is, yes. I'm talking fast. Sunday. Yeah. We've only been doing it for 3 years. So Thursday afternoons, in case anyone wants to join. And so Christian, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, like how long you've been at Wallula and what do you do and family and whatever you want.
Sounds good. Christian Swift, as you mentioned. I'm married to Sarah Swift. We have 3 kids, one on the way, so it'll be a 4th kid. Mm-hmm. I'm an engineer, and we've been attending Wallula since 2020, so about 3 years now. So.
Oh, wow. And you may have told us this before, but I can't remember. What brought you guys to Wallula?
So our other church closed because of COVID during that time, and so we started searching for a new church, and we explored different ones, and this one just connected with us. So.
Okay. And how did you find out about it?
We just knew about it. Yeah, we just knew about it. I mean, like I said, CJ, our oldest, came to Vacation Bible School here before.
Okay.
And so we're
very cool. Shout out to Katie.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very cool. Well, we're glad you're here. Glad you said yes. Hope this is a pleasant experience for you. For those that have been following, we are going through the book of Acts, and just really at the beginning of it all, Acts chapter 2. Some really exciting stuff, especially with the how the church was started. Especially from this passage, we'll be looking at what happened after Peter preaches that sermon where 3,000 people come to accept Jesus, and so what does it look like right after that, the actual early church? But like always, we're going to start with not that, but a fun question, and fun maybe in quotes this time because they're always interesting and kind of thought-provoking. This one I thought, okay, we'll see how that goes, but it's just, what's your favorite kind of sandwich? And so, some are more thought-provoking than others. This is pretty straightforward, I think. Craig?
You would think.
Yeah, we'll see where this goes, but I can't imagine, a lot of deep discussion on this one. But what did you have for your favorite kind of sandwich?
I just realized, I guess I interpreted the question wrong, or I thought about it incorrectly. Because
like a mythical sandwich?
Favorite kind of sandwich? I just thought, what is my favorite sandwich?
Well, yeah.
But
what else would
sandwich?
Wait.
I mean, I don't know. I have a specific
Warm?
one.
Like what kind? What are the kinds?
I mean, so this is my sandwich. The California Club from Jason's Deli.
Okay.
If you ever had that.
No.
I have not, yeah.
So it's a croissant bun, which I really like, and it has turkey and bacon and avocado stuff on it. And part of it is, too, you can get chips and salsa. I like their chips and salsa. It's good. They make it themselves. But then the experience of Jason's Deli, you get ice cream afterwards.
Does it come with the sandwich?
I mean, it comes with every meal. They just have an ice. Have you ever been there?
No.
Oh.
Well,
have you been there?
I have not been there.
Where is it?
Yeah.
Where is Jason's Deli?
Yeah.
I mean, Lawrence. We used to go to that one. There's probably some in Kansas City. But there's like a self-serve ice cream.
Okay.
So after you're done, you just go get ice cream.
Huh.
And the thing is, it's self-serve. You can get as much as you want.
Okay.
So I don't know if the sandwich is the thing that...
Really? I like my sandwiches with ice cream. Really? I just want ice cream, and if you throw in a sandwich, I'll take it. So you just happen to have a particular kind of sandwich you liked from this ice cream place that...
Well, it's not an ice cream
I
place.
know, I'm joking, but... So Jason's Deli...
It's a perk.
It's a perk,
of buying your meal at Jason's Deli.
So, okay. Well, there you go. That's actually, that was kind of thought-provoking there. What did you have, Christian?
Yep, I looked at it differently. I didn't know we could pick from places.
You can do whatever you want.
I know,
man.
but...
This is your world.
I know, but I chose the simple BLT. And I was thinking in a different way of, like, what is always consistent, always tastes good. Sometimes I've eaten different sandwiches that, turkey might not be good that day. I don't know, ham. But with the BLT, if you cook the bacon right, thick cut bacon always, and lettuce, tomato.
Yeah, really, the only way it doesn't taste good is if there's not enough bacon.
Exactly.
Like it's just it's not bad bacon.
It's just an LT.
It's not. Yeah, well, it's not that it's even bad bacon. It's just not enough. It's just having the thick cut, like you said.
So, and then, like I said, it's always good.
Yeah. Well, I, like always, overthought things. So I was like, what kind? I thought, well, I like a free sandwich. If it's free, I'll take it. So, and I know it sounds kind of silly, but, when they do the new members class, the Explore Wallula, they always bring like Jimmy John's or Good Sense. So shout out if you've ever wanted to check out the Explore Wallula class on Sunday nights. They provide food and dinner. But there's a lot of times stuff left over, so when youth group is over, I always go to Lori, and I was like, what do we have now? And so I usually get chips, and I love it when they have leftover stuff. So they did not have it last night. I know that. Yeah. They said, you guys can take it home, and man, everyone took them up on it. And then and also people like my son, who's just grown up going to Wallula, knows that whenever there's a new members class, there's probably going to be stuff. So he's walking around with a sandwich after youth group, and I got excited because I thought I was going to have a free sandwich, and that was the last one. But I actually thought so. But favorite kind of sandwich, I had BLT as well, and then I just really got to thinking like, but I also like this, and now this is where I've thought too deep on it. But I just thought sandwiches are so amazing. Like when I was single and growing, I was like, you know what I could do? I'll just make a sandwich. And I'm like, it's just up to your creativity, because there's any type of meat you want, any type of topping of vegetable, of lettuce, tomato, whatever, onion, the sauces, cheese. I'm like, it's just all the things I like. And we have Chick-fil-A sauce, and Graham's like, can I have Chick-fil-A sauce on my sandwich? I'm like, yeah, you can do that. Yeah, instead of mayonnaise. And so when they talk about like what's the one thing you could eat, it's not that sandwiches are my favorite, but it's probably what I would choose, just because you could change it up and toast it, whatever, if you could do it any different way. So I like sandwiches. I like how I can feed them to my kids quickly and easily. I always attribute it to like Sundays after church when I'm tired and I just want to watch football or something. I'm like, I'm just making a sandwich and just enjoying the rest that I have. So anyway, so there you go. Favorite kind of sandwich. If you're listening, free for me. Bring whatever you want. I will like it, or a BLT. So we're going to move on. And we have a couple of questions from the sermon this past week. It's Acts chapter 2, verses 42 through 47. And it talks about how these new believers, the 3,000 that got added to their number after Peter's sermon, came together, and it talks about how they were devoted to each other. And actually, since it's only like 5 verses, I'm just going to read it because it's really not very long. In Acts chapter 42 through 47, it says, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone in need, and every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all people, and the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. So that's the passage. And the first question we have is, when we go through all these right things, the things that they devoted themselves to, which was the apostles' teaching, fellowship, breaking of bread, and prayer. When you think about yourself and those 4 things, which one of those do you do best? And which one do you think Wallula does best out of those 4? And also, what do you think we would need to improve on as a church? And any ideas of how or why? Or just your thoughts on what's good, what's not good? If these are the things that the early church devoted themselves to, what about us? What'd you get, Craig?
I feel like I kind of cheated, and I didn't answer the question all the way around.
Okay.
But I'll go ahead and give my answer. And I also took a look at, I had a couple different translations in front of me of that first, this is different. But the first verse there where it says they were devoted to these things. And one of the translations I was looking at, New American Standard, said they continually devoted themselves. And then I looked up that word further, and like one of the translations was continued steadfastly, which I think goes deeper into how committed they were to these things. So I looked up the definition of the Greek word. I don't know what it was, so I'm not going to try to say what that word is. It was really long.
Go for it.
But the definition was to continue to do something with intense effort, with the possible implication of difficulty. And I thought that was like, that's a heavy definition, especially the doing something with intense effort, but then at the same time knowing like it's not going to be easy.
Right.
And so I thought that kind of frames this a little bit for me, because I think it's easy to read this and like all the things that have taken place so far, like the first 2 chapters of Acts are packed with stuff, like Jesus's ascension, not knowing what to do. Then the Holy Spirit comes and dwells, Peter's sermon, and the church just explodes. But then it almost, this little section right here, I've read it before, and it's almost like makes it, in my mind, I was like, this is just like natural. Like, oh yeah, they're just going to do this now. But reading that was like, they had to put some effort into this.
Right.
And still they had opposition around them. And so that's how they had to go into these things.
Well, what do you think? I don't know if you're going to answer this part, which part you weren't going to answer, but like, what about you personally then, when you think about that definition? And here's what I would say. I think you do all 4. So it's not you're right. And so, but like, which one do you think for you personally is, how did I word it? Or how was it worded?
Which one do you do
best?
What
do you do best?
Yeah.
Which one do I do best? I needed to reflect on this more. This is the part that I skipped over. I mean, I would say, like prayer or apostles' teaching, as far as like being in the Word and studying and time of prayer. I think those are probably strengths in my life right now. The fellowship one, maybe not so much, because I think it's easy for me to not lean into that, and maybe that is my stage of life. Not to use that as an excuse.
I was going to say, with kids,
with 3 little kids, family,
it makes it harder.
That, I was talking to a friend today. It's not like I'm ignoring other things in my life, but like so much of my time and attention is towards my family and taking care of 3 little kids, and like a lot of what I do revolves around being there. And so I think that's the hard one for me, is the fellowship.
Right. Like the fellowship you have is planned. Like if you're talking about small group or and church and things like that. And so, but outside of that, there's not the just casual meeting together or the community.
Yeah, and I it's kind of a long quote, so I don't know if I'll read it, but I thought it was really good. It's from this N.T. Wright. He has this series through the New Testament called For Everyone, and it's kind of a slightly like a commentary. It's more like a devotional, but it reminded me of when we talked about God's character in Exodus 34, and there's things listed. I remember on our podcast we talked about emphasizing each one, kind of a similar question like this, but we talked about like you can't really have like one without all of them, because that's the whole picture of who God is, kind of like fruit of the Spirit.
Right.
Like you can't just have 1 or 2 of those things, but it's this whole picture of what the fruit of the Spirit looks like in your life. So then he brought up the point that you can't have just a few of these. Like this is a whole package deal of what the Christian life looks like.
So if you're really good at prayer and with being with God and studying, but you don't have fellowship, then then it's like the love God, love people type thing.
Right. It's not the whole picture of what that's supposed to look like. And then he was like, well, if you don't have the apostles' teaching, you're gonna catch the wind of the culture around you. If you don't have fellowship, you're gonna slip into loneliness, and that's not how our faith is supposed to be acted out. Like those sorts of things. So like this gives us this framework, and it's like a complete picture of kind of spiritual formation, what the church is supposed to look like. So I thought that was good for me to hear that, because like this question, thinking about strengths and weaknesses, like everything, like you said, it's happening, but there's obviously like things we can lean into more.
Do you think our church excels in one?
I mean, that's a hard question because we go through like
Craig, you had these questions ahead of time.
I know.
I'm not springing anything on you, man. I'm
I thought about
casually mentioning the ones that are already on here.
And I thought about it a little bit, and I kind of thought about like the church calendar for us, and like there are seasons where like fellowship. Okay, well we just had our vision dinner,
right.
And so I'm like, okay, I think we're nailing that. But then like we also go through seasons where we don't have like all church meeting type stuff, those sorts of things. So like breaking of bread, I mean, we do communion every week.
Right.
Like that's a big deal for us, obviously. That's a core of Wallula and who we are. I think teaching, I think that's a strength of our church.
Right.
And I think that's really good. Prayer, like we pray on Sunday mornings together in our small groups. We have our prayer nights, those sorts of things. Like, I mean, maybe fellowship, but it's like I said, it kind of comes in waves,
right?
I would say.
Yeah.
As far as our rhythm as a church.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. What about you, Cristhian?
That was, like I said, that was really good. I had similar
job,
stuff where I put for my strength would be, spending time in the Bible. So basically the apostles' teaching and prayer were the best things. Similar to Craig, I have 3-4 kids in the way, so fellowship sometimes is hard.
So we're glad you're here, by the way.
Yeah. No. So definitely it's fun, especially. But I do think, like we just talked about, you can't have one and be really good at one. It's kind of like all of them are very important. So I do try to spend time in fellowship. So joining small groups, getting together, even outside of small groups, I try to make it.
Yeah. Well, and as someone who's, actually, you came 5 years. You started here 5 years ago, so you're a little bit more than Cristhian. But you're, as someone who's relatively newer, like your impression of Wallula as a church, maybe compared to the church you came from, or just growing up, like as a strength or weakness of these four. Yeah. What was there one that stood out to you, one way or the other, or a few that stood out?
Definitely the apostle teaching. That's one of the things that draws. We follow the Bible, and so that's always good. And I would say we do a fellowship pretty well. I mean, we do have a lot of events, a lot of stuff that, as long as you put the effort to come.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing. Yeah. Like it's we have and this is kind of a little bit more mine too, but the intentional fellowship, whereas they were just meeting together, and this will go a little bit more of the next question we're looking at about community. But yeah, we have the opportunities for fellowship, but it does require us to put in the effort to do small groups, or if kids are in youth group, and it's easy to not do that. It's easy to go to church and then be like, well, I'm done, and not feel connected, and so it's more individualistic to be communal. Like I have to decide to do this for this group or whatever. But yeah.
But I think it's good. Like I said, we do it well. I mean, even the 1KC is getting ready to start, right? And so that's actually pretty cool. We get connected with other churches and fellowship together. So do different things outside. Even I think we have prayer nights and stuff.
Yeah, we'll have a Good Friday service. With all the churches that are
good shout out, by the way. I completely forgot about that. It's coming up, so thank you. Because we for those that don't know, next this Sunday actually we're starting the 1KC thing, where we're joining up with a bunch of churches, not only in the Lansing Leavenworth area but also in Kansas City, preaching through the same series for the next 8 or 9 weeks. And we'll even be swapping some pastors, which if you've been at Wallula for a few years, you know how that goes. And so Lance is going to be gone. Some other pastors will be coming in and just showing the fellowship, not only in our church, but with other churches, and being connected in that way. That was a great example. I think what I was thinking of is, out of those four, the apostles' teaching, fellowship, breaking of bread, and prayer, for me, I thought that the apostles' teaching is the one I really like. I think because I work with students and they're always asking questions, that's probably been the biggest way I've grown in my faith, is that I have to, it's one thing to know it and say, yeah, I believe this. But when some kid's like, what does this word mean? And I'm like, like, what does grace mean? And I'm like, okay, and early on you're like, I kind of know what it means. And now I can, off the top of my head, I could tell you, oh, here's why it's different than mercy, which is different than justice, which is different than all this stuff. And that's just a single example, but it's taught me to love to look up stuff and get answers and know more. And when they start talking and say something that it sounds true, but it's slightly off. And I'm like, oh, no. Here's why that's a good question, but it's also kind of a dangerous question because it leads this way. And I like being able to do that. But I think it comes back to the idea of the apostles' teaching to stay in the Word. So for me, I know I get more out of that than anything else, and I think I do that best. And I think with Walula, I think part of the reasons that I'm in that category is because I think Walula is too, like you guys said, the apostles' teaching. I'm very thankful for Lance and the elders and the focus they have on putting Scripture first. I think it also is a reflection of our congregation. So if you ask people where they're from, technically our denomination is like Christian church. It's not technically, it is. Like it's Christian Church, Church of Christ, Restoration history, background. But if you ask, people where they came from, their background, there's not many who grew up in that specific denomination. You're going to get Methodist, Baptist, Lutheran, some Catholic, and I think it's because they were looking for something that, like, here's a place that teaches Scripture, and I can count on that. And so in the same way Jesus brought this group of believers together because they were focused on Him, I see Walulu doing that too. So I'm super thankful for that. And as far as what we could improve, I see us doing all of them. You can make an argument for any of them. I put fellowship too, but I thought I think it's more, or a good portion of, because it's an American church. We're an American church in America. I think most churches would deal with the same thing, where it's difficult in a individualistic society to have open, like Acts 2:42 kind of fellowship where they met together constantly. And it's like, dude, I got a schedule. I got kids. I got the soccer game. And it's just part of it. It's every culture has its own challenges and own focuses. And so I think that's a struggle of ours. Or of any church. The other thing I wondered is, because they were doing all this together, and it's not even saying we don't do this well, but I did wonder with communion and prayer. Like we pray at the end of it's in small group, and I just was kind of checking myself on this, but even with communion, it's still kind of individualistic. Like, here's yours, here's mine.
Yeah.
Someone's going to say a devotion, or, on stage, and then we're going to pray. We'll do it at the same time, and that's it. And it's not if it's mimicking a meal, that's not how you have it. You know what I mean? And I think that's just traditional, maybe cultural ways that we do communion. I was at a church once, and it was the weirdest thing, but I kind of look fondly back on it. They would say, during communion time, get up and go have communion with someone. And so, and I remember being like, what is going on? This is my time with Jesus. I'm trying to be, and because I really love communion, but that's just the way they did it. And it's not a right or wrong, but when I looked at, I don't know if experimenting is the right word, but trying communion a different way, I thought, oh, that seems, it's stretching a muscle that I'm not used to when it comes to being communal during communion with other people. So, but I don't think out of all of those that Wallo's doing any of those badly, or even needs to be improved upon. It's just something different. Yeah.
I was going to read real quick from, and right when you ended, it's along the same lines as this. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, Paul kind of hits on this. He's writing to the church, and he doesn't say explicitly like these 4 things, but he just encourages them to keep doing it. So this is 1 Thessalonians 4, starting in verse 9. It says, "Now as to the love of the brothers and sisters, you have no need for anyone to write to you." So they're doing those things. "For you yourselves are taught by God to love one another. For indeed you practice it towards all the brothers and sisters who are in Macedonia. For we urge you, brothers and sisters, to excel even more." So that's a huge encouragement to me, that he sees a church doing these things, and he just says, do it more.
Right.
And so I feel like that's what, like you said, it's not like we're like missing one of these or anything,
right?
But it's like, well, just keep doing it more,
right. And
that's what we need to do,
right? Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I think that's really good. And even trying things, even if they don't work, it's like, hey, yeah, that was good, but we're trying. Like the United as One, I think is a great example. Like that's a gamble. Like, hey, we're gonna have another pastor come here, and we've only been doing this for 2 or 3 years, so it's a relatively new thing for us, and ways to fellowship outside the box that we're used to, and I think we are seeing the fruit of that. But I like that. Like you said, trying it even more.
And I think, like you just said, experimenting and trying new things, that's what they had to do.
Right. Yeah.
Because it was
everything's a new thing.
It's like there were 12
right.
core guys.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, just exponential growth. But they want to keep doing these things.
Right.
And it's like, well, there's thousands of us now.
Everything is new. Right.
How do we do this?
Yes. Yeah.
So we're not alone in figuring it out.
So we talk about within the verses, like, oh, this is the church did all these things and they were sharing everything. We're gonna get to that, but we have to remember that it started with these core foundations. So in order to get to the point where everyone is sharing and helping and it's a community, it has to be rooted on that. So like and Lance even talked about this a little bit, but like how people like, oh, the church, it's like communism or socialism, like they sold everything. It's like you can't just have something like that without having the core of biblical teaching, prayer, fellowship, communion, basically without having Jesus at the center. And so we go from this of having that as our base, and now in questions, we're looking at questions 7 and 8. I'm going to kind of combine them here, but it said, what does it mean that the believers had everything in common? What does that look like for the church today? And what do you think holds most Christians back from living in community today like they did in the first century? So if there is there a difference between then and now? And if there is, what do you think is holding us back from doing it that way? What'd you think, Craig?
Yeah, I looked a little bit into what that looked like. Like you said, Lance mentioning like this isn't like a socialistic society type thing. And like one of the commentaries I read was like, if you had excess of things, then you would get rid of those in order to help someone else, meet the need of people. So it's not like you're just getting rid of everything you have and handing it over to someone, but it's really the attitude of like, all my possessions aren't mine. Like you're willing to share something with someone else or let them borrow something else, or like you just don't see everything as your stuff. And I think that's hard in Western American culture,
but it's also a very biblical one. Like this world is not my home, this stuff is not my own. So I think it's a deeper thing than anyway. Go ahead.
I think that's a big piece of it is just a willingness to do that. It reminded me of so before Haley and I were at Wallula, we attended and served at Refuge Christian Church in Eudora. And at that point, I mean, it was a church plant that was it was less than a year old when we started. But the former pastor there, Jeremiah Holcomb, was really good at living this out and getting his church to be people that lived that out. So they kind of had this motto, see a need and meet it. And that would fuel a lot of the things that they would do in the community or within the church. And he just always had that on the forefront of his mind. And that spilled over into the church and the people. And I thought that was really cool. And that's what we're seeing here is like, see a need and meet it. And like with Jeremiah Holcomb, there was like almost like no hesitation, because if he heard of a need, he was like, we're going to figure this out. And he resourced people, resourced things that he needed in order for this need to be met. And that's what we saw happening in the church, really just like giving up of ourselves, our time and energy or whatever to make sure that people are taken care of. And I was thinking too, like, what holds us back from that sort of thing? And I really think like individualism in our society. I read a book a few years ago called Misreading Scripture Through Western Eyes, and it points out just different things that kind of like blind us from seeing certain things in Scripture and living them out. And one of the chapters was on how individualistic our society is. And he even broke down, like, in this time period, and even now, and not like on the other side of the world, people don't do things by themselves. So like if they were going to go to the grocery store, someone's going with them. If they're walking somewhere to school or the market, like people are doing things together. And we're like, I'm going to go get in my car.
Oh, dude.
And I'm
getting convicted as you're talking.
And I'm going to go to the grocery store.
Dude, and when I get out of the car, I'm going to put my earbuds in. And I'm going to listen to music and go I'm looking forward to this.
Not just headphones, but like noise
canceling. Yeah.
And then we're and then we get in our car, we go home and pull in our garage, shut that garage door and unload. So like just even stuff like that, we're just used to that.
Yeah.
And we don't think about that. Like that's just I mean, I grew up doing that.
I like doing it. Do I have to stop that?
Yeah, and so that's like getting into like the details of like day to day life.
It's ingrained in us. Yeah.
Yeah, it's ingrained in us. Like so many things are individualized in our culture, and to where like we often think of ourselves first, where this is like an outward focus to other people. Yeah. And I think that was probably the biggest thing that I had, and I'm reading a book right now on like spiritual formation, and John Mark Comer is the author, and he's talking about like people don't like following something, like kind of in like postmodern world that we're in, or it's like a postmodern world a little bit. Like we want to be like the blank slate that drives our own ship, and no one can influence my thoughts or decisions or actions or anything like that. And so we just want to do our own thing. But to be part of the church means you're going to do things for the good of the church, your family. Yeah. So.
Yeah, for sure. Christian, what did you think?
Same thing. I was reading into that, similar where communists, they were talking about like, not necessarily, they were not giving out, also doesn't say like they were giving out everything, so where they didn't have anything. So the main thing that I saw was the willingness to actually want to do that. And so like, again, it wasn't where they were without homes and giving up everything. It was basically giving the extra stuff maybe that they had to help out. And so to me, I know Lance talked about it as well. It was a little bit of like, back then they kind of depended on each other. And so like, now if you think about it, a lot, we don't know how good we have it.
Well, I guess it's a good point. Like, so, like, what do you actually need? Unless you're, really struggling financially, you're probably like, I don't really need anyone. Like I'm not, it'd be nice to have something. But yeah, we don't even have that. If people who don't have a lot are actually more giving because they've been in that situation. And so when we're blessed with stuff, sometimes we forget like what it's like to actually be in need and then seek that out, see a need and meet it. Yeah. But yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, if we don't have it ourselves, then it's hard to recognize it in others.
Yeah. And so I think that's one of the biggest things that I saw where it was, and it just goes of like, I don't know, stuff, I guess. That, especially here in the U.S., I guess, it's what I've seen that when you talk to other people from other places where they don't, maybe they're surprised that we have 2-3 cars. And so they're like, whoa, like, where it was like when we were going to church, we all got together, one person drove, or we got a taxi or something similar to that.
You got a taxi to go to church?
No, I'm not saying me. I'm talking about other people.
I was like, wow, you are devoted.
No. It's what I meant, like in other places.
Yeah.
Like,
they may just ride with. Yep.
And so they ride together. They make, and some people may not have cars, and so
yeah, or just walk.
And so.
Yeah, I still feel like that's a little because like thinking about going to Honduras and doing stuff, people just walk for miles to get to it, and you're like, or they could have taken a taxi. I was like, no, they probably has to walk because they don't have them anyway.
Yeah.
It's like we can't fathom just doing that. So they had everything in common. What does that look like? And for me, I'm going to answer both, but like, what does it look like for believers to have everything in common? A couple of things that put out that I thought of was one, Jesus. So they had that in common. And you got to think 3,000 people right then come together. They don't have a lot in common. You get 3,000 people together, even if you're all from the same demographic. The differences in that group, like we just think it's a group of 3,000, but each person is unique and, valuable to God and has their own opinions about everything. And so there's not a lot of things you're like, oh, we all have this in common. And so how do they come together? And, it's through Jesus. And so focusing on the same things. What else did they have in common? Because they were all together, the thing they had in common was that they were one body. And so their needs were the same. So even if I'm financially okay, this body is not. And so it's not that Craig needs help and that's Craig's problem, but this is our problem. Yeah. See a need and meet it. And so your problems became our problem, And so their concerns or problems became everyone's in common. And then also, that they were one team. That's what they had in common. Like we're all together, which is kind of the Jesus part. But it reminded me in 1 Corinthians 12, talking about the body, and it says, just as a body, though one has many parts, but all its many parts form one body, so it is with Christ. For we are all baptized by one Spirit, so as to form one body, whether Jews or Gentiles, slave and free, and we are all given to the one Spirit. And then going on, hang on, it's segregated here. And in verse 25 it says, so there should be no division in the body, and that its parts should have equal concern for each other. If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. And so that's what I see as they had everything in common. And it just makes it easier. And you think about if you're on a team, if you're on a worship team, or you're coaching a soccer team or what. I don't have sports illustration, so I'm going off you guys. But, if I'm driving the church van on a youth trip and some kid says, I'm sick, I'm going to throw up, we are all going to stop this van. We will all stop this trip. We will all help this kid get out of the van. It's all of our concern now. And when you're forced in a van, you all want that kid to get out of that van and do that. But there's an urgency on your part. But even when you're just hanging out and doing life together, the same urgency is there. Like, hey, this is all of our thing. What holds us back today? And you guys said it. And I put America, and I'm not here to bash on it. I love it. However, the American dream, you work for it and you get it. And there's a really cool thing about that, an idea, a teaching about that, where when you work hard, you can succeed. But on the flip side of it, it makes it, you take ownership of it, but now it becomes, I don't want to say even prideful, but like, this is what I got. I worked hard. I got this. And so it fosters the individualistic, worldview. And so, that makes it difficult when we have passages that talk about community. And we're like, okay, I will schedule my community time for Thursdays at 12:30 with my small group and on Sunday mornings. And then I have everything. And, we do that. And the other thing is not so much America. I think it's all around the world. But I said culture, but what I really mean is like technology. Is that even in communal countries, they still have cell phones. They still are on social media, which is social media is not a positive unifying force. It unifies people to whatever side you want to be unified on. You will find that group, but it does. I mean, you guys know, like whatever you believe, you'll find your group, and then it makes it more tribal. And so I said technology, it makes us more alone. I was talking to a former student of mine, Abby Hilliard, and she had given up Facebook. And I was asking her about that because it's been years now. And she said, I said, did you notice any differences? And she goes, yeah, you have all these friends on Facebook stuff. And then her birthday comes up and she goes, she had friends who'd never even reached out to her because the only way they knew about it was, on Facebook, which is fine. I do the same thing. I wish people happy birthday. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. And so
thanks for the reminder.
Right. Yes. However, she's like, so yeah, you do lose that connection. But you still have the ones that do remember because it actually is your birthday. And so basically what she's saying is like, yeah, it cuts off the ones that are superficial, but the ones that are actually there, like community-wise, are there. And so it reinforces what is a natural and holistic way of like an actual community, not a virtual one. And then I just said also we're busy. So, forget America, forget everything else. Just we got soccer schedules, I got kids, I got work, I got everything else. And so we do all these things. And I think one of the things, this is my last point, and I promised him I had 4 points. Why does it hold us back? And I also said, I think we have a misguided view of what fellowship is. That we think, because we've even mentioned this, we fellowship Sunday mornings. You know how little I talk to people like in an action, like this is fellowship, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm around people. That's why I said communion, like, we're doing it, but we're not really fellowshipping. To actually do life as a phrase that we like to throw on at church, and it's really doesn't happen a lot unless you're really, really intentional. And I said one of the reasons I think it's difficult to have community is because our view of community and fellowship is limited to not superficial, but not super deep engagements, which is why as a youth pastor, I love youth trips. I love being stuck in a van.
Yeah.
I love being bored with the students. I love for them, I don't love when they complain, but when they do, I'm like, hey, there we go. We're getting to something. Let's talk about, just what do you want to do? And then we'll play a game, whatever. And to see their personalities come out outside of me teaching or playing a game, it's them being real and, getting frustrated and being tired and being excited. And that's why I still love not only doing youth ministry, but going on these youth trips that parents are just like, why are you doing this? This is like, thank you. This is crazy. I don't know if I can do that. And I'm like, I get so much out of just getting to know these students more than on Sundays. Yeah. And so I think, but I think, how do we get back to all this? Understanding this, and then having grace for ourselves if we're in a season of life where I'm pointing to you guys, children, it's okay. You can stay back. But then also they share, people who have excess amounts like you talked about. I was once where you guys were with, having little kids, and now I have more time so I can, I have excess amounts of time so I can spend more time with others. Yeah. Right. And if it's resources, then for sure, if it's knowledge, then that, but just recognizing how God has blessed us and being able to see a need and meet it.
And I think that's what you're talking about, the outside of Sunday morning stuff. That's why small groups are so important.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Lance would say that. He usually says like that's our first line of defense for meeting needs. Like that's a core group of people that you get to know well over a period of time. Right. Like we've been in the same small group for 3 years, something like that. So what's going on in each other's lives. And you get to a point where you just, if something's happening, you share it. Right. Yeah. And then you're able to meet that need. Like I just think of the times where like people are having babies in our church, and then all of a sudden people are showing up at the doorstep with meals and stuff like that. So that's like the first line of defense for these things to happen. And when you're talking about Sunday, if you look at the life of Jesus, he was very intentional about like busyness, like slowing down to eat a meal with people was part of his rhythm. Right. So like Zacchaeus is up in a tree and he's like, hey, I'm coming to your house and we're going to have lunch. Like that's part of what's happening. Yeah. The disciples. Instead of jumping
to the lesson about why he's wrong and how he can.
And I think that's a huge part of the busyness is if we stop and eat a meal, like you said, being bored in a van together, it's almost like you're forced into conversation. That's kind of maybe the bad way to put it. Right. But like, you're not going to sit there in silence for 20 or 30 minutes, but instead you're going to talk and have a conversation. And Jesus knew that. So he's constantly like, we're going to eat together. Yeah. Like after his resurrection, he shows up and he's like, let's have a little meal here on the beach. I'm going to talk about this.
Well, and even with Christian being here, like the fact that you're here is because we never cross paths. I see you sometimes at church, but there's no way that I think I would have ever spoken to you until your kids get to middle school. But because we do small group together, right? Seeing you every week for the past few years, it is opened up to, just hearing more about your story, hey, can you come help us? And so it creates these organic things where we just casually do life and check in on each other and know about what's going on and helping each other. And when you're just naturally doing it, it's very organic. You can be with each other and help each other and laugh with each other. And it's great, but it does take, hey, we're going to meet on Thursdays, and then that kind of lays the foundation. We're going to go to church and we have this in common. And
it's like my definition, with intense effort.
Yeah. And it really is. Yeah. The idea of, I joke with the student, and we should wrap up after this, but I joke with the students, when you look at spiritual disciplines and it's like, oh, there's prayers and all this stuff. If you talk to a non-Christian and they're like, okay, this is what I got to do. Like, yeah. And then I told our students, I'm like, dude, you're already nailing one of these, which is fellowship. Like, you're here on Sunday mornings and Sunday night. I was like, do you realize that for someone who's not doing this at all, if you were to tell them, hey, you need to now wake up on your weekends to come to church on Sundays, and then we also have youth group again, which you kids do without even thinking because you've grown up, they would think that's so hard, and then you're just doing it. Like, you're already so good at this, which is just the showing up part, having history together. And so I just encourage them that way. Like, we just keep it up, but having those foundations help to grow everything else. Anyway, any other thoughts?
I would just add that small group thing. Like, I don't know if you're new to Wallula. We came the first 3-4 months, I would say, before we joined a small group. We weren't connected, right? We would come into church and we didn't know anybody. Then we joined a small group. Both of us did, and the rest is history. And it's just like you actually get connected. You get to know the people because, like you said, I'm sure I've seen you for those 3 months.
Yeah.
Never talked to you.
No, when you came, I was like, I have no idea who these guys.
I've been here for 6 months, Zach.
Yeah, no.
And so, but
the number of times I've met people multiple times, I'm like, this is your first time? They're like, I've been here 6 months. I was like, okay, I'm sorry. And then, but unless I'm interacting, it's just, you kind of just forget on Sunday mornings that there's a lot going on. So anyway, well, Cristhian, thank you so much for joining us. We're glad you're here. This was exciting for us, just because we know you and you've been with us for a few years now. So good luck with everything with the baby that's coming. Who's coming? That's coming for Sarah. So we will talk to you guys next week as we start the United as One sermon series.